A compliment coming the way of our in-studio guest, Kevin Seifert, ESPN.com. Jason from Egan. The Darnold topic is a great reminder of the difference in shows with hot takes / screaming opinions and shows that provoke thought / curiosity. And you can learn something. And he has you in that latter category. We'll take that as a
thank you very much. I appreciate
honor,
that.
Correct? Yeah.
It couldn't have done it without you.
It's not bad. Now, there are other people ripping you for dismissing the number of folks whose livelihoods depend on a certain measure of snow.
No, they weren't being dismissed. I was just saying I know people are going to accuse me of that, but I still have those feelings.
Here's another good talker, I think, to start the 4 o'clock hour. Seifert, this is from John in Playa Vista, California, where there's probably not much snow.
Never.
Who is more valuable to the Vikings if only one of the two can be paid? Sam Darnold, especially if he keeps playing at this level, or Brian Flores?
Well, it's almost, Brian Flores doesn't fall under the salary cap, so you can pay him
whatever
you want.
But you can't give him a head coaching job.
You can't give him the head coaching job, but you could do everything else to make him as comfortable as possible. After going through that whole Darnold-McCarthy discussion, you still have a pretty decent option if you end up not being able to get Sam Darnold to come back under your budget or under your constraints. And so, to me, I would break the bank for Brian Flores.
Let me ask you a philosophical football question, because, in the end, the Vikings win fairly convincingly against Atlanta. But for the second straight week, it appeared you had a visiting opponent, that came in and played very conservatively, piled up the yards, but really were not able to sort of, maximize with touchdowns. And who was on TV color for the game this last week?
Greg Olsen.
Greg Olsen, actually both games, you're right. And he made the point, more this week than last week, that he was very disappointed in Atlanta's lack of aggressiveness, that at some point that the Vikings offense is going to take off enough and they're going to score touchdowns, and so you can't play this conservative game. Do you buy that, or do you think it wouldn't really have mattered that much that Atlanta just wasn't as good? They obviously weren't as disciplined given the number of penalties they took. What do you think of that whole issue of how much a game can be tilted if the opposing head coach, who's getting some yards but not touchdowns, keeps trying to go after it?
Well, I mean, to me, the contrast between the two teams was pretty stark in terms of throwing the ball either towards the end zone or into the end zone. That's the one thing that
yes.
Neither team, the one time the Cardinals did it, I guess they scored, right? That Marvin
That's
Harrison
true.
touchdown in the back.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not to say, well, if you throw it more, you'll get more touchdowns. But that's, unless you have this power running game that can power it in, and the Vikings tend to be pretty good on run defense for the most part, especially in the red zone. And I think
they did some slashing.
Yeah, and I think they're
Atlanta.
Yeah.
Although not in the red zone, you're right.
Yeah, and I think that their defense is pretty good. The Vikings defense has gotten pretty good in the red zone. But to me, I very, especially with these zones that the Vikings play, I know teams are feeling like they can't throw into the end zone, but that if you can't or don't, then you're not gonna. There's only so many points you're going to score.
More text pouring in. Dan, I'll give you a perfect example of why you don't stay with Sam Darnold. Randall Cunningham. It took years to recover from the huge contract given to a former great QB who had a great 1998. Never repeated that success again. Sam's success this year is no guarantee of future successes. That's Kirk from Alexandria. This came up yesterday, and I thought, look, there are arguments to be made about the idea of moving on and not assuming that just because you caught lightning in a bottle this year, that Darnold is going to be great for the next 5. But the Cunningham analogy is very flawed, because Cunningham was at the end of his career. In fact, I think he was in, speaking of Vegas, wasn't he doing buildings and
laying bricks
in Vegas, and was not supposed to be the starter. Johnson goes down and he had a hell of a year. It was obviously his rookie season. So no, you got to have stronger evidence than that. Cunningham everybody knew at the end or close to the end at that point. Darnold could be at just the starting point if he has figured something out, if he's discovered electricity at this particular date, and there is no guarantee that he has. but they're in completely different positions.
So the better analogy is actually 1 year after that, where Randall Cunningham came back and was a starter in '99. Do you remember who they signed as the backup for that year?
In '99, Jeff George.
Jeff George takes over, and all hell breaks loose. Like, he is just gunslinging down the field.
Yeah.
They go 8-2 with him the rest of the way. Like, that first game he played against the Lions, he came in the second half. He's just throwing. He said, I have Randy Moss.
A better arm than half the quarterbacks in the league today.
Yeah, and I've got Randy Moss and Chris Carter, and I'm going to make every throw that every coach previously told me I couldn't make, or I shouldn't try. And he completed most of them. I think he led the league in like yards per completion because it was just down the field. Best season of his career. And they get to the play. They win. I think they won a playoff game, and then they lost to the Rams in the divisional round.
Yeah, that was the game where he ran away from the fumble.
Right.
Remember?
And so maybe that, I don't know what they. And then they really didn't make much of a play to bring him back. They tried because they had Dante Culpepper on the roster. They did try to sign Dan Marino in a random fit of glory, but they didn't get that done. They couldn't get anybody signed, and so they made Dante Culpepper the starter, and he ended up being pretty good that year, and they went from there. But to me, that's a little bit of a closer historical analogy in Vikings history.
So give me, the last couple weeks, other teams have gotten, especially first halves, like some major yardage.
Yeah.
So if you're a Vikings fan, should you worry at all about what this says about the defense? In the end, if they're not really giving up touchdowns, does it matter?
Yeah.
What's the state of the defense right now?
So I asked Brian Flores on pretty much that exact question about yardage, and like, there's always been this big debate about this. Is yardage really the right way to measure a defense? And like he was talking about, he said there's a lot of other contexts you have to consider, whether, how you're doing on third down, how you're doing on takeaways, how you're doing on plays that back a team up, like sacks or forced penalties or whatever, and red zone defense as well. But he also said like it's too many yards. Like they don't want to give up this many yards. They need to figure out the things that are happening. And one thing he said specifically is that they need to tackle better. There's been some, especially against the Falcons, there was some runs from their two running backs where they had people, pretty locked up, and they got away from them or got extra yardage. So he said they're literally, I guess tomorrow, Vikings are having a little bit of a weird week where normally for a Monday night game, you just push everything back. But tomorrow, Wednesday would be like a day off, but they're going to have like a full on practice tomorrow. And it sounds like they're going to be working on tackling. Like that's what Flores said. Like even in the middle of the year or end of the year, really, we're in week 15. They're going to work on tackling drills, and he feels like that's really important for them to do right now. So that's what's going to happen tomorrow. And so long story short, like, yes, because the yardage, it's not nothing because it keeps you on the field.
Yeah.
It keeps giving them more opportunities to score. They've past two games, they've gotten to halftime, and the other teams had like twice as many plays and like a third of the more time of possession. And that definitely plays a role especially when you have an older defense as they do. And so he's not dismissing it as a problem. It doesn't tell you they're a terrible defense, but they need to not be giving up 400 plus yards a game.
Staying with the defense, pending free agents, players that are going to be free agents, who are the most important players that the Vikings absolutely positively have to lock up
defensively? Mm-hmm. The first guy that comes to mind is Byron Murphy. He's still really young. They signed him on a 2-year deal, so this is the second of the 2 years, and he's had a great year. I mean, 6 interceptions. Those were obviously, you can have 6 interceptions and still be a terrible player, I guess, on the other 92% of the snaps. But apparently, he's been really good, and with 6 picks, he's probably going to be an All-Pro. You have to start thinking about things like that, and so you talk about a pretty hefty contract that's going to be coming his way from somewhere. But all of their their top 3 cornerbacks are all pending free agents. Gilmore's a pending free agent. Shaq.
Is he going to be back Monday night?
I don't know. They've got an extra day, so that's certainly, but I'd say 50-50 right now. But so all 3 of their top 3 cornerbacks are free agents. And so I don't, like Gilmore he'll be 35 next year, I think. So you got to really look at him probably later in the spring or even summer to see if he still wants to play and he still is worth paying anything to. Right now he's had a good year, but like at that age, it's very much year to year. And so But if they lose all three of those guys and they have to totally rebuild that position, that's saying a lot. And so I think Murphy, pops in my head as a guy right away.
We didn't
need to resign
against Atlanta. We did not start Moreau, correct?
Well, he played in the nickel. So the two starters were Griffin and Murphy,
right.
And they were in their base a lot more than they usually are. But Moreau did play.
That was what it was.
Nickel. Yeah.
So he didn't get. I mean, the week before when he came in, he got burned a couple of times. You could say the first one was a questionable PI, the second one not so much, but they both hurt.
Yeah, they did, and he had not played probably a snap for like 12 straight weeks on defense at least, and so. Probably a little rusty there, but he's fine as a nickel. As things move forward, and they've got a young player, undrafted free agent, Dwight McGlothern, that they like and was active for the first time this past week. So they're starting to mix in some of the younger players, but that's a position that we'll be talking about a lot in the offseason. One
more segment with Seifert. We'll get to some more texts and a couple other follow-up questions I want to cover with him. And as I mentioned, Rich Gannon should join us about 4:30 or Kevin Seifert back for one more quick segment. Gannon, at the bottom of the hour, you mentioned to me that they're going to have a regular hard practice tomorrow, Vikings. Will KJ Osborne be practicing with the club?
And that's, he got waived by the Patriots and didn't really work out there. He signed a 1-year, $4 million contract, and it didn't really work out in terms of production. And so he's certainly available. There's no health reasons why the Vikings would have a need on their depth chart, but he's certainly a favorite of everybody in the building. And if they were to need a receiver, I'm sure they could do a lot worse than bringing him back.
On our production meeting, Guardsy, do you still have the audio you played yesterday of the very specific and direct question offered up by Ben Gessling to Kevin O'Connell, the head coach of the club?
I do. It's part of a talking point, so give me a minute.
All right.
Give me a minute to cue it up.
It just occurred to me that with Seifert here, who was there for that moment, and I think you said there was some chuckling that included Seifert's laughter. I want to get his reaction to it. So in a minute, Guardsy will give us that, and it sets the tone better to actually listen to it again, especially for people who have not heard it at all.
Ready to roll here?
Yeah, let's roll.
For Sam, of all the work he gets to put in to earn the trust of the teammates, is there any of that for you guys, just in the sense of you do make a quarterback switch from a guy that's been here for a long time and saying, trusting yourselves that you can make this happen? Is there any part of this game that's a validation of that at all for you and front office?
No.
Okay.
So my role in there, that was me. And what you can't see, obviously, in that is that about halfway through the question, Kevin O'Connell clearly knows where it's going and starts smiling. And I'm like, oh, there's going to be something good here. Like, we know he knows what the intent of Ben's question is, which is, I don't want to say gloat over the decision that they made, but, sort of close the door, take credit for the fact that they made the right decision to let Kurt go and to move on. And he just said no. And so that was my sarcastic response to my disappointment of him not going there.
So the no I heard from him, I took as he bit it off more because I'm past the point where I have to explain myself to any of you chowderheads. I know what I'm doing, and so I'm not waiting for this vindication moment. Am I reading too much into that answer?
I think he just didn't want to express the vindication that was obvious to everyone as it is. And it sounds crazy, but sometimes we ask questions that we know the answers to, but we need or would like the person involved to be the ones to say it. And he totally understandably did not want to go there. There's no reason. They just won the game by 21 points. There's no reason to stomp on the grave or to gloat or to do anything to draw attention away from the fact that the answer was on the field.
Chris F. texts, funny, 2 weeks ago on the show, I texted that the Vikings should extend Darnold now, and Seifert condescendingly dismissed that possibility.
I don't recall being condescending ever in my entire life.
Not once.
So I
patronizing,
don't think
maybe. Not condescending. Big difference.
I did not think that I don't remember how I answered it, but
I don't even remember the exchange.
Sure that I still think that doing it now just there's no reason
it makes no sense
to
do it now. Why would you? Why would? And he wouldn't. They wouldn't do it now. Would they? Well, I guess if it was an incredible
2 weeks
deal,
ago was when they signed Daniel Jones. So maybe he said they shouldn't have brought Daniel Jones in. They should have just signed Sam Darnold.
I'm glad you brought Daniel Jones up. Is he any closer to becoming this season, the rest of the way, the number 2 quarterback?
Well, I asked last Friday, so basically a week into his tenure, like how things were going, and O'Connell did say that they had gotten him a few reps with the look team, which is not easy to do when you have 11,000 quarterbacks on your roster,
yes.
as they do. Actually, it's only 4, plus McCarthy being 5. But they actually did get him a few looks, and he said he looks like a guy that's played a lot and big and strong and smart. And so they at least took that initial step that he's not just over with the assistant quarterbacks coach working on his own. Like, he did get involved in practice, which isn't a small thing when you have a 4th quarterback on the roster.
So he has not been in uniform yet, right? He is not dressed.
He's on the practice squad this past game, and so past 2 games, and so to my knowledge, it's going to stay that way, and we'll see if they want to try to get him on there for one game to guarantee them part of the compensatory formula if he ends up going elsewhere, but we'll see on that.
Does anything that's happened since we talked last in this subject give you greater reason to believe that the Vikings can still steal the division title?
Well, the Lions defense, I mean, they've been close to losing the past 2 games. I mean, the Packers were right there, and the week before was the Bears Thanksgiving game, right? And
Correct.
so, like, they've come down to the last drive. I mean, like, I know, like, we've seen the whole league is 1-score games, but like all that has to happen is the Vikings to gain 1 game on the Lions before that Week 18 game. Yeah. And then if they win that game, they can win the division. So it's not crazy to think. I mean, the Vikings have to do their part and win in a part of the schedule that you say noted correctly is going to be a little bit more difficult, especially after this week. But it's not without, outside the realm of possibility.
Yeah, we had, what day was it, Guardsy? We actually struggled to figure out that.
It was Thursday. It was the day of the game.
Yeah, it was the day of the game. If the Lions and Packers tied,
oh my God,
and the Vikings then beat the Lions, that the Vikings would win the division, and I was fairly certain of it, but Guardsy talked me out of it because he's so afraid of the math.
Trust but verify.
And then I became afraid of the math.
Well,
and they almost tied. By the way,
I know. I was really pulling for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, but my understanding is it turned into a discussion about whether 15 wins or 14 wins was more important.
We've had some really dumb discussions, and I take full responsibility.
No, like, hey, we're all here because we didn't do well in math.
No, that's it.
Correct.
Had we been good at math, we would be in a much different business.
That's true.
And probably helping the world a lot more than we are now.
Why was Jones not signed to a 2-year deal? It's a 6763 texter guy wants to know.
Aaron Jones?
I think he means, I don't know. I think he might mean Daniel Jones.
Daniel, yeah, that's more likely.
Yeah.
I'm guessing he didn't want to. Like, he, don't lock. Yeah. He wouldn't want to lock himself in, and he's going to have a bite at the apple in free agency and whatever. Not that his value is going to change a whole lot between when the Giants waived him and when he signs elsewhere, but that would have made him miss the free agent market, and I don't think he wanted to do that. And I don't think the Vikings needed him to do that either. I think they feel like if things go well here with him, that he'll re-sign with them before free agency even starts, if that's what they want to do.
You retweeted, by the way, as we wrap up, somebody called Computer Cowboy. Lions, Packers, Vikings are 28-3 against the rest of the league, and outside of games against each other, none of these teams has lost since October.
Yeah, so the last time an NFC, one of those 3 teams one of those 3 teams lost to a non-NFC North team was when the Vikings lost to the Rams on that Thursday night game, and was that mid-October. So, yes, it's been a while. It's a very good division, a historically good division. Vikings picked the wrong year to be 11-2. Thinking that it would, 11-2 would normally be pretty smooth sailing to a division title, if not potentially home field advantage, and that could all still happen. But the preseason predictions of a strong division have come true.
Monday Night Football, that's next, right?
Yes, on ESPN and ABC.
We're happy for you.
Yeah.
And the good news is it's on KFAN radio, which means we're out at 5 o'clock on Monday.
Oh,
pregame show
that'll give you
start
time to get downtown for the game.
I should go this year, but I think I might not.
Okay.
Well, I don't have a parking pass.
Well, But even then,
yeah, it wouldn't matter.
He only goes when he's recognized on the Jumbotron
then
for making the Hall of Fame.
you want me to ask
give me a
them
suite.
if they'll do that?
Give me a suite.
You need a suite and you need a Jumbotron.
That's it. That's all I ask. It's not
relatable.
much. That's it. Very relatable. Very not elitist at all.
No,
For sure.
I mean,
One of the people.
If that's all it takes, then then I'll see you Monday night.
Well, otherwise, I'll see you next week.
Okay.
Kevin Seifert, ESPN.com. Rich Gannon on the Vikings quarterback situation and even the division at large. He is scheduled next here in the Fan.
Time now for the Vikings Report on the Fan, presented by Miller Lite. Vikings safety Cam Bynum joins Barrero next after this from Miller Lite.
More Vikings conversation and quarterback talk with our old friend, former Vikings quarterback Rich Gannon, kind enough to join us via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. I'm looking at a list of quarterbacks who played for the University of Delaware's Fightin' Blue Hens. You know, it's pretty impressive. It really is. It's obviously you and Flacco at the top of the list. A quarterback I remember named Jeff Comlow, not quite as successful. Pat Devlin, Andy Hall, Scott Brunner. That's pretty good for a school that people don't really think of as a quote-unquote football school.
It's like USC or Stanford of the East, I think.
Pretty much. How the hell did
How
you...
you doing, buddy?
All right, how are you?
Doing great.
How did you end up at Delaware, by the way? Is there a great backstory to the Rich Gannon recruiting saga?
Penn State, Notre Dame didn't want me. You know, I had an older brother who played there, was a 3-year starter, and he was about 5 years older than me, and so I'd go down there and watch the games. But you know, Dan, when I was in high school, I was a senior in high school. I was about 6'2" and about 185 pounds. And back then, you know, at Penn State, if you weren't 6'4", 220, they weren't really looking at you. So, you know, I just wasn't the biggest guy, and so I kind of fell between the cracks. I didn't play defense, and so, you know, back then when they recruited a kid, you know, if they didn't work out a quarterback, he was athletic enough, you could make him a defensive back. So I kind of fell through the cracks, went to Delaware as a 3-year starter. I played in an offense that probably wasn't great for me in terms of, you know, playing in the NFL. I played in the Delaware wing team. So by the time I came to Minnesota as a rookie in 1987, I didn't know which way was. I didn't understand protections. I didn't understand concepts. I didn't understand defenses. I mean, we saw a handful. You know, the conference that we played in was. So anyway, that was my story. It took me a while to kind of get
figured it out.
But figured it out.
You certainly did figure it out. Okay, so what do you make of Sam? Is Sam Darnold figuring it out in a way that you think is sustainable? That this doesn't have to be sort of a 1-year wonder. It can be, no, this guy can be a starting quarterback in this league, either here or someplace else. What do you think?
Well, I mean, look, when you look at his body of work this year, and it's not just what happened last week against Atlanta where he threw for 5 touchdowns. I mean, then I think when you look at his body of work this season, I mean, he's crawled into this MVP conversation. I mean, I just got the phone with another voter, and, you know, you look at his numbers this year, he's got 28 passing touchdowns. He's completing, you know, over 68% of his passes. They're 11-2. There's also some conversation about him as the comeback player of the year. Now that, you know, the Associated Press has been talking about it. You know, there's a whole story about that, but he's had that type of impact on the season. There's no question about it. And so I'm happy for him because I've been in his shoes and how difficult it can be when you go through some turmoil and some adversity early in his career. But you know, I think going through that, and you and I have had this conversation before, I think can help you. It can better prepare you for these type of situations. I think he certainly appreciates it more now. He's enjoying it more. But, you know, you go to the Jets for 3 years. He was 21 years old. He wasn't ready to play. He goes out there. He has a bad experience. The team loses confidence in him. The fans, the coaches, and they kick him to the curb after 3 years. He goes to Carolina. That wasn't a good situation. You know, he had Matt Rule, first-time head coach and first-time play caller, and they fired him. You know, it was really bad. I think pushing the reset button last year and going to San Francisco and being around Kyle and Brian Greasy and those guys was a good thing. And then coming to Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell, I think, was just the icing on the cake. Kevin played the position. He's coached the position. He sees the game through the eyes of the quarterback. He doesn't get enough credit for the job he does as a not just as a head coach, But as a play caller, he's done a really nice job, and I think certainly Sam has benefited from that relationship. He's got some confidence. He's got somebody who believes in him again, and that's so important at that position.
You know what the plan here has been. We're bringing Darnold in for this year. We need a bridge QB, and it gives him a chance to maybe resurrect his career and go someplace else. And then we'll start the clock again on J.J. McCarthy next year. They might have even, been thinking that even before the injury that was the plan, that give him a year to sort of for J.J. to sit and figure some things out. Has enough happened already with Darnold that you believe the Vikings, at the very least, have to reconsider that plan and maybe even blowing it up to commit to Darnold for maybe another 2 years?
I would just say, look at what's happened in the division, right? You look what the Packers did with Aaron Rodgers. They sat him for 3 years. They sat Jordan Love for 3 years. I'm not suggesting that that's going to happen with J.J. McCarthy, who is coming off of a knee surgery. But, at the end of the day, who gives us the best chance of winning? I don't know the economics. I think it's going to be very expensive. If Sam Darnold's able to keep this going, he's making himself a lot of money, and not just, I'm talking crazy money. And here's the other thing, Dan, there's so many teams out there that need help at that position. In the AFC alone, you got the Raiders, the Browns, the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah.
In the NFC East, the Giants need help at that position. You start looking around, you start saying the Saints, do they come back with Derek Carr? I mean, there's a number of teams out there that are going to be willing to spend real money to go out and get an established veteran quarterback. And then, then there's Daniel Jones, who just happens to be in the same quarterback room right now. He's in the same boat as well. I think this is a very interesting and very unique situation that the Vikings have to figure out and sort through. But for Sam's perspective, you got to put that in the back burner. He's got to finish strong. He's got an opportunity to do, and the team has some opportunity to do something special here the next 4 weeks. They've got winnable games. They're going to make the playoffs, and if you get into the playoffs and do some damage, then that conversation gets even more interesting.
If we do the plateau game, putting good teams on different plateaus, saying there's a difference between greatness and goodness, where do you put in the NFC? Are the Vikings in the top plateau? Are they one rung behind or underneath that top plateau, which we all assume is the Detroit, or what do you think?
I think without question. I think you look at the West and the South. I mean, I don't think that, the Seahawks, it's just look what's happened in that division. Yeah. I mean, the Seahawks have won 4 straight, and the Cardinals have lost 3 straight. Now at 8-5, the Seattle Seahawks are in first place in that division. I still think the Rams at 7-6 will probably win a division. But my point is, I don't think anybody out of the West is a playoff team that's going to do any damage in the playoffs. I would say the same thing about the NFC South. You look at the 6-7 Falcons or the 7-6 Buccaneers. I don't think, I'm not suggesting they'll be one and done, but I think the best teams in the NFC right now are the Philadelphia Eagles, the Detroit Lions, and the Minnesota Vikings. I think that's people. And what's interesting, because I get it from a national perspective more so than just the local perspective, even though I live in Minnesota. Yep. But people are saying, the Vikings are 10-2. Who have they beaten? They did not. I'm like, what? I'm like, who have they beaten? What do you mean? They beat the people on their schedule. People say, well, you look at the last 6 weeks, they beat the Colts, they beat Jacksonville, they beat Tennessee, they beat Chicago, Arizona, Atlanta, not great defenses, not great quarterback play. I said, I don't care. They're beating everybody they have to beat. And I think when you look at their roster, I mean, this is a good roster. I mean, Addison and Jefferson and the tight ends, healthy again now. Hawkinson and Aaron Jones has been terrific. I think defensively, the job that Flo has done, they lead the NFL in takeaway or interceptions. They're getting after people. The pass rush is terrific. I mean, this is a team that's got some juice. This is a team that's got some swagger. And I don't know why, from a national perspective, people keep talking about the Eagles and the Lions and overlooking the Minnesota Vikings.
Where do you put? You put the Packers then, just below?
Oh, yeah. No, the Packers are legit, too. I mean, look what the Packers have won 7 of the last 9 games. The only 2 losses they've had, Dan, it's the Lions. I mean, they had the Lions on the rope the other night. So, the Packers are legit. I mean, I think what's amazing to me is who would have thought at the beginning of the year that the Lions, Vikings, and Packers would be. I think all 3 make the postseason. I really do.
Yeah, they're in obviously very good position for that. And we were talking about with Kevin Seifert earlier the nugget he had was that none of those three teams have lost except to each other since October. I mean, it's been crazy.
Well, think about this. The Lions have won 11 straight. The Vikings have won 6 straight. And the Packers have won 7 of the last 9. And the only losses have been to the team that's won 11 straight.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty competitive. You know what's interesting, though? When you think about those three teams, you got really good head coaches, you got really good coordinators and play callers, and you have really good quarterback play. And that's if you can do those three things, and then defensively and kicking game, all those other things. But when you look at those three teams, you got good head coaches, you have structure and discipline, you got accountability, a level of professionalism, preparation, you got good quarterback play. I mean, that's the key in today's NFL.
28-3 against the rest of the NFL, the Lions, Packers, and Vikings, which is outstanding. Real quick, one other thing on the quarterback deal. I know you got to go here pretty quick as well. McCarthy, look, I think you thought he's an intriguing prospect. I think you believed when you've been on with us before that he might need a little time. So I'm not diminishing what I think he has a chance to become. But I don't think we can assume, this notion that, you can't even think of reinvesting in Darnold because this guy's ready and he's going to be really good. We don't know yet, right? I mean, the only way we're going to know is when he's out in the field. And he's got the tutelage, you could say. He's got a lot of ability, it seems. But there's how this works at the quarterback position. There is no guarantee. There are many times there's a fork in the road immediately. It goes one way or the other for whatever the reason. And I think too many people are making it seem like, one guy out and this guy in and nobody's going to miss a beat. Maybe that'll happen, but we certainly don't know that, do we?
There's no way you can know, right? I mean, you hope. You've done all your due diligence. You've done your research. You studied this kid coming out. He's a junior entry. He's a 2-year starter at Michigan. He went 27-1. I mean, there's a lot to like there. And I think you look at him through the preseason, that Viking game, he did some really good things. Of course, he gets hurt. And then, you have to push the reset button. He's missed a lot of practice. He's missed a lot of reps. He's obviously, doesn't have any game experience in the NFL. And so, I think he's certainly going to benefit in this all-season program, the quarterback school, and come back next year, and he'll be a lot further along. But as you said, Dan, the guy, you can't really find out for sure until you see him play. And I think, you look at some young quarterbacks that have come into our league that have really struggled. This year we have a couple that are playing well. Bo Nix has been terrific with Sean Payton out there in Denver. Jaden Daniels has played well in Washington. Caleb Williams has been, he's had some good moments. He's had some really bad moments. And he was the first overall pick in the draft. There are no guarantees just because you were a first-round pick.
Who is your MVP right now in the league?
I think Josh Allen.
Mm-hmm.
But, we start talking about Sam, like he wasn't even in my, I'm one of the voters. I think when you go back and look at, he had that game against Indy, he had the game against Jacksonville,
right.
He threw, 5 picks in those 2 games, and you thought, here he is, he's fallen off the wagon, he's back to taking, making bad decisions. And then he comes back and he takes, I'm sorry, the Rams and the, no, that's right. Yeah, it was the Indy and Jacksonville game where he threw the 5 picks. But then, the last 4 games, he hasn't thrown a pick. He's thrown, 11 touchdowns. I think when you go out and you play against the Falcons with Kirk Cousins, there's a lot of eyeballs on that game. And he goes out and has the type of game that he had where he threw for 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, and you look at his body of work. There's some momentum right now. If he takes advantage of these next 4 weeks, he could certainly be in that conversation.
Richie's 27 too. That's the other thing that makes this interesting about how you go forward with
him.
He's
a young pup.
Yeah,
Dan,
he was
the youngest. He was one of the youngest players in the league when he came out in 2018. He was 21 years old, and they threw him out there before he was ready. In a market like New York, and they just killed him.
Yeah.
I give the guy a lot of credit that he's still standing, and I'm happy for his success.
And lastly, what I guess I didn't know about him or hadn't paid attention closely enough to know about him is his mobility. I mean, it's not like he doesn't ever get sacked, but he's made a lot of plays where he's gotten away from pressure and then thrown. He's also run for a few first downs, but I guess I didn't know about that component to his game, which I think has been sneaky really good this year.
It's a real asset. I didn't know that about his game. I did a lot of his games early in his career in New York. He's always had very good mobility, good escapability. I think the unscripted offense. We always talk about, can a guy make him 5 or 6 plays each week? Left tackle swings and misses, get beat around the edge. Can he step up, step out? Can he get down the perimeter? Can he run for a couple first downs each week? This guy has very good mobility, and it's I just think he's been a great fit in Kevin's offense.
Thanks for joining, as always. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas to you and yours,
too.
and we'll talk soon. Thanks, Rich.
See you, pal.
That is Rich Gannon, former Vikings quarterback, former MVP in the National Football League as well. Also played in the Super Bowl, if I'm not mistaken. That was with the Raiders, correct?
The Raiders.
Yep. Wasn't that the occasion where the night before the game, one of his linemen disappeared, remember? Just went to Mexico?
Is that right?
That was him,
That makes sense.
I think we've talked to him about that in the past.
Yeah.
Very strange
Against
story.
John Gruden's Bucks.
That's it.
Right?
That's exactly
the guy
right.
who believed in him, John Gruden.
Think about it.
Brought him to, I guess, Oakland at the time.
Isn't it funny how these things work?
It's a small world, this football world,
It
Dan.
really, really is. By the way, are you going to be prepared? Because, you always find ways to get out of the top 5 at 5.
It's right here, baby.
Oh, it is ready this
I'm
time.
ready to go.
Okay, well, we got a couple more minutes now.
Yep.
Because Gannon had a couple things he needed to get done. I'm glad we got to him as well. Reaction to our discussion, Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line is still open, and that number, of course, is 64686. Interesting to hear Gannon say he's got an MVP vote. And
makes sense.
He's at least he now believes Darnold should be in that conversation. I wouldn't put him at the top of the list at this point, I don't think. Who's the running back that the Eagles have that they got from the Giants?
Saquon Barkley. He's nice. He's so good.
Better than nice. And he absolutely should be in the conversation this year. And I wonder sometimes if people get so sick of, voting for quarterbacks that he might win on the novelty of it.
Yeah.
But I would say he could win on the merit of it as well.
Yep.
He's been that effective and that good.
And that important to his team.
And that important
the
to the team.
turnaround for the team, for
That's
the
it.
Eagles. They've been great. We're seeing that in college, too. There's a little bit of, I don't know if quarterback fatigue is the case, but like Hunter from Colorado and Genty from Boise State are the front runners for the Heisman.
Yes.
It's really nice to not just go look and say, who's the best quarterback on the best 3 teams? Who's the quarterback on the best 3 teams, and let's give it to them, right? Felt like there was that run in the Heisman, too.
Yes,
These
that's true.
Player of the Year awards have become so quarterback-driven. It's nice to have different options. Now, I don't think you should win it just because you're not a quarterback, but it's nice that other people have stepped to the table there.
What kind of shot do you give my Indiana Hoosiers against Notre Dame?
Good shot.
Do you?
Yes, I do.
It's in South Bend.
Yes.
Ticket prices through the roof. You see the prices?
I have, yeah.
It's remarkable.
We talked about it, yep.
And Bozich puts it at 30%.
Is that lower than you would have thought?
That's lower than I thought he was going to go, but he might be right. I don't know. I haven't watched Notre Dame enough. Obviously, they had that early season loss to Northern Illinois.
Right.
I'm sure we'll discuss this with Mace tomorrow, but I haven't seen them since. They've clearly recovered from that.
Yeah.
But I don't even know what their strengths are. I don't know, how that meshes.
You're right.
And the other thing that fascinates me is with this tournament, you got a game. I think they're playing Friday, December 20.
Yep.
Night game, I think. Not sure.
I would assume yes.
In South Bend, Indiana. So it's probably going to be pretty chilly.
Same with Columbus
Right.
the next night.
We're not used to having significant college games played this late where you could have some significant weather conditions. South Bend, you want to talk about Calcutta Clippers? They get lake effect snow sometimes.
Do they?
I have no idea what the forecast is. That's a ways off. But they, we're talking once again about the elements, and we're used to playing non-bowl games. It's November, and it's done in mid-November at the latest. And then if we get into bowl games, and most of them that matter, they're played in pristine conditions pretty much, right?
Pretty much. Dome stadiums or tropical locations.
Yeah.
I'm so fired up about the 12-team playoff.
I am too. I have to admit, more than I thought I'd be.
Well, you got a team in it.
Well, that helps. But I'm saying, yeah.
But just in general, Tennessee and Ohio State, in Columbus, I think the next night. And, there's been so much talkability around the teams that are in it, the teams that aren't in it. the brackets, the seeding, how they already want to tweak it. Do they want to expand it? I don't think it's lessened the regular season at all. That was one of the big concerns, right? That
no, it did.
We have the ultimate playoff. It's called the regular season. Well, we just saw you can still have an epic, right? The championship Saturday, I know it was lessened in terms of attendance. There were some places, like even the Big Ten, having Oregon and Penn State there in Indy, the greatest host city ever. The attendance wasn't very good. It's like, well, both those teams are in the playoff. Their fans aren't going to blow a bunch of money, as great as Indy is, to go to Indianapolis and check it out. And so there was a little bit of luster taken off of that stuff, but the games and the performances, I thought Championship Saturday was awesome.
Yeah, it went well, and it bodes well for there's still debate about who's in and who's out. And all that proves is it doesn't matter. You could make it a 24-team tournament. You can make it a 48-team tournament, and you're not going to eliminate that. And so I don't lose my mind over that anymore. I mean, we can have the debate, but I'm going to say, well, I can't believe so. It's like, well, you're never going to lose those debates, no matter how many teams are in. There's always going to be those teams that are on the bubble. Were you at all surprised that Bama was sacrificed, or did you say it was they had to?
I wasn't, because they had to, and that's one of the
56-yard field goal sealed that. Correct?
Yes, and yes, exactly. And I'm always trying to figure out, like, they had their AD's bitter about, he basically says, we're going to change everything we do with scheduling.
Right.
Everybody's complaining. The SEC basically wants its own championship.
Yes, they do.
They don't want to be a part of anything, which I don't think you can really do and have the rest of the country care or get the money. I don't think you can do that. But yeah, because of having SMU ranked ahead of them before Championship Saturday, I didn't think you could necessarily punish SMU for playing while Alabama did nothing. And that's where the new discussion is, do they have to stop these build-up rankings?
Yeah, right.
Which are for an obvious reason, TV, interest,
gets people
discussion,
excited. Yes.
Get it in the ecosystem. But I don't think it helps them, because they put themselves in all these different boxes. There's the conference champs angle that I think they have to tweak too, because Boise and Arizona State are 2 top 4 seeds because they were conference champs, but in the rankings, they're much lower, 9, 10, whatever it is. And so Oregon, who has done everything they wanted to do, number 1 seed,
undefeated,
they'll probably have to play Penn State in round 2 at the Rose Bowl. So they get the bye, but they get no home game. They get Penn State, who I know people like to make fun of James Franklin for never beating a good team, but that's a pretty good team.
Yeah.
It's just, there's so much talkability with it. I'm just fired up.
We're favored in the Mayo Bowl, correct?
Yeah,
Mayo Bowl?
Virginia Tech keeps losing players to the portal, too, is what Bernsey told me on the Pair and a Spare pod.
What's our situation there?
So it's okay now.
In terms of portal losses.
There's some people.
Not just portal losses, but just people saying, I don't want to play because I got to go to the pros.
The left tackle, Ursery, wasn't going to play anyway. He won't play. He got hurt in the Wisconsin game.
All right.
I'd be surprised if Daniel Jackson played. I asked him if he was going to play on the field at Camp Randall, and he goes, we're still working through that. Which led me to believe you've had a good run, Daniel. Thanks for everything. But I don't know. Like, Brosmer's playing. Quinn Carroll's playing. I would assume Darius Taylor's playing. He played in the bowl game last year. I would assume Coy Parrish is playing. They both announced they were coming back earlier in the week, so I think they'll be in good shape.
Top 5?
We're going to answer a lot of questions. Where has Glenn Taylor been? Will Bill Belichick be the North Carolina coach? And are the Twins taking trade calls for Carlos Correa?